A wedding night is supposed to be the beginning of a beautiful journey, a moment filled with love, celebration, and the promise of a shared future. For 68-year-old Martha Jennings, that future was meant to be a fresh start, one she had waited a lifetime for. After years of being alone, she had finally found someone to share her days with, someone who made her feel wanted, safe. She had just exchanged vows with 27-year-old Derek Sullivan, a man who had come into her life with affection, charm, and promises of devotion. They smiled for photos, danced under the glow of wedding lights, and held hands as guests showered them with well wishes. It was the kind of love story that defied convention, the kind that made people talk. And they did talk. A lot. A 40-year age gap, whispered concerns from friends and family, quiet speculation about what had drawn Derek, a man in his 20s, to a woman approaching 70. Some questioned his intentions. Others believed love had no rules. But as the evening faded into night, none of that seemed to matter. The ceremony was over. The guests had gone home. It was just the two of them now, stepping into their honeymoon suite as husband and wife for the very first time. 3 hours later, Martha Jennings was found engulfed in flames. The bridal gown she had carefully chosen was reduced to ashes. The room she had reserved for a night of celebration had become a crime scene. And the man who had stood beside her just hours earlier, the one who had kissed her, danced with her, and pledged his life to her, had vanished. What happened inside that room? What could have led a wedding night to end in such horror? And more importantly, who really was Derek Sullivan? Before we continue, if you're fascinated by true crime stories and want to hear more cases like this, make sure to like and subscribe for more true crime stories from the deepest part of the human core. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. To understand how this night unfolded, we have to go back to the beginning. At the moment Martha Jennings first met the man she believed would change her life. The town of Fairview, nestled in the quiet countryside of State Country, was the kind of place people moved to when they wanted a peaceful life. A place where neighbors knew each other by name, where doors were left unlocked, and where crime, if it happened at all, was the kind that rarely made headlines. It was here, among these quiet streets, that Martha Jennings had built her life. She had spent decades as a school teacher, guiding young minds, watching children grow from curious students into capable adults. She was the kind of woman people described as warm, kind-hearted, the one who never missed a Sunday service at church, who brought homemade pies to community gatherings, who always had time to listen. At 68, she was retired, widowed, and well-respected. But beneath the admiration and respect, there was also something else: loneliness. Her husband had passed away over a decade earlier. Her children were grown, living states away, busy with lives of their own. The house that was once filled with noise and laughter had become quiet, too quiet. And then she met Derek Sullivan. Derek was 27, young, handsome, charismatic, a man who, on paper, seemed to have little in common with Martha. He was new to town, someone no one really knew much about. He told people he worked online, that he was an entrepreneur. His past? Unclear. His story? Always shifting. Their relationship raised eyebrows from the very beginning. A 40-year age gap was hard to ignore, especially in a town like Fairview, where people noticed everything. Martha's friends were cautious, her family skeptical. But love, or at least the idea of it, can make people see what they want to see. Within months of meeting, Martha and Derek announced their engagement, and just weeks after that, she was dead. Her murder wasn't just tragic, it was brutal, shocking. The kind of crime that left law enforcement stunned, the kind that made people ask, how did no one see this coming? To answer that, We have to go back to the beginning. Martha Jennings wasn't the kind of woman who made reckless decisions. She was measured, thoughtful, a woman of faith, of routine. For decades, her life had been predictable. Then came Derek. Their paths crossed online, an unusual place for someone like Martha to be looking for companionship. She had been hesitant about dating again, unsure if love was something meant for her at this stage in life. But loneliness has a way of making people take chances. Derek was charming. He had a way with words, an ease about him that made Martha feel special. He listened. He laughed at her stories. He made her feel seen. And in return, she gave him something too. Stability, a home, and, as investigators would later discover, something else. Something worth killing for. April 14th, the day Martha Jennings had been waiting for. The wedding was small, intimate, close friends, family, a modest ceremony in the backyard of her home. People clapped, they cheered, they told her how happy she looked. But even in the middle of the celebration, there were signs. Derek had been distant, distracted. Some guests noticed that his phone never left his hand, that he barely touched his plate during dinner. When Martha reached for his hand, his grip was loose, fleeting. It wasn't the behavior of a man deeply in love. It was the behavior of a man waiting for something. Or maybe for someone. By the time the guests had left, the house was quiet again. Martha, exhausted but happy, walked up the stairs to their bedroom, the start of a new chapter. She had no way of knowing it would be her last. They had decided to spend their wedding night at a small boutique hotel just outside of town, a place Martha had chosen. Cozy, elegant. She had planned every detail, chose the room, the champagne, even the soft music playing in the background. 11:03 p.m. Martha and Derek are seen on security footage entering the suite. 1:27 a.m. A fire alarm goes off. The hallway fills with smoke. Guests rush out of their rooms, confused, disoriented. When hotel staff arrive, they find the door to room 306 locked. Inside, the fire is spreading, the flames consuming the bed, the curtains, the walls. And in the middle of it all, Martha Jennings. By the time first responders managed to break down the door, it was too late. Martha was found near the center of the room, her body badly burned. The fire had been intense, fast spreading, and yet something didn't add up. The flames hadn't started from an accident. They had started from a gasoline accelerant. Someone had doused the room, poured fuel on the bed, the carpets. Someone had made sure the fire would spread quickly. And that someone was gone. Derek Sullivan had disappeared. No calls for help, no sign of a struggle, just a missing groom and a woman burned alive on her wedding night. What had started as a love story had become a homicide investigation. But the real question remained. Where was Derek Sullivan? Martha Jennings had never considered herself the kind of person to look for love online. She had spent most of her life in the real world, face-to-face conversations, handwritten letters, Sunday morning coffee with friends. But as the years passed and the loneliness set in, the internet became a window to something new. A way to connect. That's where she met Derek Sullivan. It started with a message. Derek had reached out first, commenting on one of her posts. A simple compliment, nothing too forward. He introduced himself as a businessman, someone who worked remotely, someone who traveled often. Over time, their conversations became longer, deeper. He listened. He asked about her past, her life, her dreams. He made her feel wanted. But not everyone saw it the same way. Her friends were hesitant. They told her it was unusual, a man in his 20s, suddenly so invested in a woman 4 decades older. Her children, though distant, were concerned. Something felt off. Martha dismissed their concerns. She believed in second chances. And Derek? He knew exactly what to say to make her believe in him. Within months, they were inseparable, or at least that's how it seemed. Their relationship moved fast. Too fast. Derek showered Martha with affection, but there were signs, small things that in hindsight meant everything. He discouraged her from seeing friends, insisting they didn't understand their love. He convinced her to adjust her will, saying it was just a precaution, something all married couples did. He handled her finances, assuring her that it was easier this way. And every time someone questioned their relationship, he was ready with a response. "They just don't want to see you happy," he'd say. "They don't know what we have." By the time they announced their engagement, Martha had distanced herself from nearly everyone who had once been close to her. She didn't see it then, but Derek wasn't just a husband-to-be, he was a man in control. After the reception, Martha and Derek checked into the Fairview Inn, a boutique hotel just outside of town. Martha had planned everything: the room, the champagne, the quiet intimacy of a night meant for newlyweds. But Derek, he had planned something else. At 2:45 a.m., the fire alarm sounded. Hotel staff rushed to the third floor. Smoke poured from under the door of room 306. The hallway filled with chaos, confused guests, shouts for help. When they finally broke through the door, the flames had already spread. And in the center of it all, Martha Jennings. She was still alive, barely. Her body covered in burns, her hands reaching out as if trying to escape. Paramedics pulled her from the room. She was rushed to the hospital, but the damage was irreversible. Martha Jennings died just hours later, and Derek Sullivan? Gone. As investigators examined the scene, one thing became clear: this was no accident. The fire had been intentional. An accelerant, gasoline, had been poured across the bed and floor, ensuring that the flames spread fast enough to leave no room for escape. But what stood out the most? Derek Sullivan's complete disappearance. He hadn't called for help. He hadn't tried to save his wife. He had simply walked out of the hotel, into the night, never looking back. Security footage showed him leaving the premises at 1:37 a.m., more than an hour before the fire started. By the time authorities tracked his movements, he was gone. No credit card activity, no phone calls, no social media updates. Derek Sullivan had vanished without a trace. With no sign of Derek, authorities launched a manhunt. Airports were checked, bus stations, train routes, rental car agencies. Nothing. It was as if he had disappeared into thin air. But the truth? Derek Sullivan hadn't vanished. He had help. And when investigators finally uncovered the truth about his past, they realized this wasn't the first time he had done something like this. This case was only just beginning. Before she became a headline, before she became another tragic name on a police report, Martha Jennings was someone. She was a mother, a grandmother, a woman who spent her life giving her time, her love, her kindness to anyone who needed it. Martha had spent nearly 4 decades as a school teacher, shaping young minds, teaching children not just how to read and write, but how to believe in themselves. In her community, she was the kind of person people remembered, the woman who never missed Sunday service, who volunteered at the library, who baked cookies for the neighborhood kids just because she could. She was loved, and she was trusting. Maybe too trusting. Martha had been widowed for nearly 10 years. Her husband, Richard, had been the love of her life. They had built a home together, raised children, and grown old side by side. But when Richard passed, something changed. The house felt quieter. The days felt longer. The friends who once gathered around her table had their own families, their own lives. Martha wasn't unhappy. She had her faith, her books, her morning walks. But she was alone. And loneliness, real loneliness, doesn't announce itself loudly. It creeps in slowly, in the empty spaces where laughter used to be. So when Derek came along, young, attentive, charming, he didn't just offer her love. He offered companionship, and she wanted to believe in it. Martha's daughter, Elaine, had seen the first red flag immediately. She had grown up watching her mother and father's love, a slow, steady kind of love, the kind that's built over years, not months. So when her mother suddenly announced she was engaged to a man 41 years younger, Elaine hesitated. At first, she kept her concerns light. "Mom, don't you think this is a little fast?" "I know what I'm doing, sweetheart. Derek loves me. Age doesn't matter." But the closer the wedding got, the more Elaine noticed things that didn't sit right. Martha, who had always been so independent, now deferred to Derek for everything. Decisions about her finances, her health, even her daily routine. Derek had an opinion on all of it. And then there were the little moments that Elaine couldn't ignore. Derek cut her off in conversations, spoke for her even when she wasn't asking him to. He discouraged her from seeing old friends. And then, the biggest sign of all, he convinced her to adjust her will. Martha, always trusting, saw nothing wrong with it. Elaine, however, did. "Mom, you barely know him." "Elaine, I love him. You don't have to understand it, but you have to respect it." The conversation ended there. It was the last real talk they would ever have. Because just days later, Martha Jennings became a victim. Martha's friends had their own concerns, and they weren't subtle about them. Over coffee, they had asked her, really asked her, if she was sure about Derek, if she had any doubts. Martha had laughed, waving them off. "I know what I'm doing. He makes me happy." But one friend, Linda, recalled a moment she couldn't shake. Just weeks before the wedding, Martha had been telling a story, something from her childhood. She was mid-sentence when Derek placed a hand on her arm, firm, controlling. She stopped talking immediately, and Linda swore she saw something in Martha's eyes in that moment. Something small, something quick. Not fear, not quite, but hesitation, the briefest moment of doubt, and then it was gone. She smiled, continued her story. That text was sent the night before the wedding. Linda never got the chance to ask what Martha meant, because by morning, it was too late. Martha Jennings had plans. She was supposed to visit Italy in the summer, her first trip overseas. She had just started painting again, something she hadn't done since her 20s. She was supposed to see her grandson graduate. Instead, she spent her final moments burning alive in a hotel room. All because of a man she thought she could trust. All because of Derek Sullivan. And now, he is gone. Derek hadn't just run, he had planned his escape. No bank transactions, no phone pings, no digital footprint. For a man with no criminal record, no history of violence, he knew exactly how to disappear. But where did he go? And more importantly, was he planning to do this again? Because when investigators started digging into his past, they discovered Martha Jennings wasn't the first woman he had targeted, and if they didn't find him soon, she wouldn't be the last. When firefighters arrived at the scene, the hotel room was engulfed in flames. The smell of gasoline was unmistakable. Martha Jennings was found near the doorway, her body badly burned, but even through the destruction, one thing was clear. She had fought. Her hands bore deep lacerations, scratches on her arms, and under her fingernails, skin. It didn't take long to confirm. The DNA belonged to Derek Sullivan, and yet he was nowhere to be found. But what investigators didn't realize at first, Derek wasn't just running. He was erasing himself. Authorities issued an immediate BOLO, be on the lookout. Martha's car, a silver Toyota Camry, was last seen heading west on the interstate, captured on a toll booth camera just 30 minutes after the fire started. By morning, it was abandoned outside a Greyhound bus station. Derek was already gone. The problem? He paid in cash. There was no name attached, no digital footprint. And Derek had one more advantage. He knew exactly how to disappear. As investigators dug into Derek's background, they found something chilling. He had been married before, twice, and both marriages ended under disturbing circumstances. His first wife, Rachel Carter, had disappeared in 2014. She was never found. His second wife, Lillian Green, filed for divorce after just 6 months. In court documents, she described Derek as controlling, manipulative, and dangerous. She had taken out a restraining order just weeks before he vanished from her life entirely. And now another woman, Martha Jennings, was dead. Was this a pattern, or something even worse? Fire investigators quickly confirmed the flames had been set deliberately. An accelerant, gasoline, had been poured directly onto the bed, the curtains, the floor. The fire alarm in the hallway had been disabled. And then there was the gas station footage. He had bought it just hours before Martha was set on fire. It was no accident. It was no crime of passion. This was planned. Investigators soon uncovered the most damning piece of evidence yet. Just weeks before their wedding, Martha had taken out a $500,000 life insurance policy. And the sole beneficiary? Derek Sullivan. He had done the same thing before. Both of his previous wives had taken out similar policies. Rachel, months before she disappeared. Lillian, weeks before their marriage fell apart. Each time, Derek had positioned himself as the sole inheritor. This wasn't just about love, it was about money. And Martha Jennings had just become his latest victim. With the evidence piling up, the case against Derek was airtight. But there was one problem. He was still missing. Over the next 72 hours, tips flooded in. A gas station attendant in Kentucky claimed he saw him buying food. A motel clerk in Tennessee swore he checked in under a different name. But each time authorities arrived, Derek was already gone. It was as if he knew where they'd be before they even got there. And then they discovered why. Investigators traced a number Derek had been using, a prepaid burner phone purchased the day before the murder. The messages led to a name that no one expected. A woman. And not just any woman, his next target. Because while the world was searching for Derek Sullivan, he was already making his next move. For 4 days, Derek Sullivan was a ghost. He had abandoned Martha's car, switched buses, and used fake names at motels. Every time authorities closed in, he slipped away. But one mistake would bring everything crashing down. Because Derek wasn't running alone, someone was helping him. And when police found out who, it changed everything. At first, investigators assumed Derek was acting alone, but then they discovered the phone records. The burner phone, purchased before Martha's murder, had sent multiple messages to one number. The owner? Anna Lopez, 31 years old. Derek's former co-worker at a car dealership, a woman he had been secretly seeing for months. Anna had been sending Derek money. She had booked him a motel under her name. And most importantly, she knew where he was. When police confronted her, she denied knowing anything. But then, detectives pulled the text messages. In the hours before Martha was set on fire, Derek sent Anna a message that prosecutors would later call chilling. 11:42 p.m. After tonight, we'll be set for life. Don't answer if they ask about me. 2:20 a.m. It's done. Anna's role became impossible to deny. She wasn't just helping Derek escape. She had known about the plan before it happened. She was charged with aiding and abetting a fugitive. And under pressure, she gave him up. On the 4th day of the manhunt, police received a tip. Derek Sullivan was hiding in the basement of a relative's house. At 3:15 a.m., officers moved in. They found him curled up on a mattress, his phone in his hand, still texting Anna. His reaction? No fight, no denial, just silence. As officers handcuffed him, he spoke just 4 words. It was an accident. But the evidence told a very different story. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The prosecution presented the forensic evidence, the surveillance footage, and, most damning, the text messages. Derek never took the stand. His defense? that Martha set the fire herself, that she had been drunk, that he tried to save her. The jury, listening intently, one juror shaking their head. But when the prosecution played the gas station footage, Derek buying the gasoline, it was over. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Their verdict? Guilty of first-degree murder. The judge had no mercy. Derek Sullivan was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For Martha's family, justice had been served. Her daughter spoke at the sentencing. She wanted love. Instead, she got a monster. Derek showed no remorse. Ana Lopez, the woman who helped him escape, pleaded guilty to aiding a fugitive. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Martha's house, once filled with warmth and laughter, sat empty, but her legacy lived on. A scholarship was created in her name, the Martha Jennings Fund for Education. Her final lesson? That evil doesn't always come in the form we expect. Sometimes, it walks into our lives with a smile. What do you think about Derek Sullivan's sentencing? Do you believe Ana Lopez deserved a harsher punishment? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this case as shocking as we did, don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories. Because sometimes, the truth is darker than fiction. Martha Jennings was a woman full of life, a retired educator, a grandmother, a friend to many. She had spent decades shaping young minds, always teaching others to be cautious, to think critically. So why couldn't she see the danger in front of her? Could this tragedy have been prevented? That question would haunt her family, her friends, and even the investigators who worked the case. Martha's daughter had warned her. She had told her mother, "Something about him doesn't sit right with me." Martha's response? Age doesn't matter when it's love. But age wasn't the issue. Control, isolation, financial motives, these were the real dangers. Her friends had seen it too. The way Derek would cut her off in conversations, the way he discouraged her from spending time with her family, the way he insisted on handling her finances, even though they had just met. To those closest to her, these were red flags. To Martha, they were excuses made by people who just didn't understand her love. By the time the truth became clear, it was too late. Martha Jennings was not the first, and she won't be the last. Her case raises uncomfortable questions. How many people ignore warning signs until it's too late? How often does financial exploitation turn into something much worse? How many victims convince themselves that love will fix everything? Derek Sullivan didn't just take advantage of Martha's kindness, he weaponized it. And for Martha, who spent her life believing in the best in people, that mistake was fatal. When people first heard about this case, the focus was on the age gap. A 27-year-old man marrying a 68-year-old woman. It made headlines. But age gaps alone aren't the problem. The real issue? Power imbalances. Derek Sullivan wasn't looking for love. He was looking for control. Martha's wealth, her home, her savings. To Derek, these were just stepping stones. Her trusting nature made her an easy target. And once he had what he wanted, she became disposable. Martha Jennings should have been celebrating a new chapter in her life. Instead, she became another name in a tragic statistic. But her story serves as a warning. A reminder that manipulation doesn't always look like violence. That love should never come with control. That the people closest to us can sometimes be the most dangerous. Her family now speaks out about financial abuse, about coercion, about the dangers of blind trust. Because if sharing Martha's story prevents even one person from falling into the same trap, then her loss won't be in vain. Do you think Martha's murder could have been prevented? Should authorities do more to track financial exploitation in relationships? And what about Ana Lopez, the woman who helped Derek escape? Did she deserve a harsher punishment? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this case as unbelievable as we did, don't forget to subscribe, because the truth is often more disturbing than fiction. This case is shocking, heartbreaking, and, most of all, a reminder of how easily trust can be exploited. Now, we want to hear your thoughts. Did Martha's family miss the warning signs? Or was she truly blindsided by someone who knew exactly how to manipulate her? Could law enforcement or financial institutions do more to prevent cases like this? And what about Ana Lopez, the woman who helped Derek escape? Should she have received a harsher sentence? Let's discuss in the comments below. Martha's story is not unique. Financial abuse, coercion, and manipulation happen every day. But the more we talk about it, the more we can protect those who might be vulnerable. If you found this case important, hit the like button. If you want more deeply researched, gripping true crime stories, subscribe. And if you think someone you know needs to hear this story, share it. Because awareness can save lives. This has been another True Crime Deep Dive. Thanks for watching. And remember, the most dangerous people aren't always the ones we expect.